Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Faithful, get ready. Because what we're about to tell you is not just a football story, it's the kind of gut-punch, tear-jerking, fist-pumping redemption arc that Hollywood writers dream about. Buried inside a dominant blowout win, hidden behind the box score, behind the highlight clip everyone has already watched a dozen times, is a secret that fans had absolutely no idea about. A wide receiver who fans assumed simply had one bad hamstring injury last season was actually battling something far more brutal, far more heartbreaking, and far more relentless than anybody outside that locker room ever knew. And when he finally broke free for the touchdown that sent an entire stadium into a frenzy, there was a flood of emotion behind it that goes so much deeper than 6 points on a scoreboard. Stick around, because we're taking you straight into the locker room for this one, and trust us, by the end of this video, you're going to look at that touchdown completely differently. Let's set the stage. It's late at night, the game has just wrapped, and reporters are pouring out of the visiting stadium, watching stadium crews literally scrub the opposing team's logo and end zone lettering off the turf, evidence of just how thoroughly San Francisco had taken over the building. But the real story of the night wasn't happening on the field anymore, it was happening back in the locker room, where one particular conversation completely changed the way fans would understand one of the most electric plays of the entire preseason. Here's the bombshell that dropped. Wide receiver Jacob Cowing didn't just deal with a single hamstring injury last season. He tore that same hamstring not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 separate times over the course of one single year. 4 times. Think about that for a second. Most players who suffer one hamstring tear spend weeks nursing it back, terrified of re-aggravating it. Cowing went through that exact cycle of pain, rehab, hope, and heartbreak 4 separate times in a row. He described it himself as going to hell and back. And when you actually sit with that description, it starts to make complete sense why an 83-yard punt return touchdown on that exact field meant so much more to him and his teammates than just another highlight in a preseason box score. So let's rewind and actually walk through how this magical moment came together, because Cowing broke down every single detail himself in the locker room afterward. The instant the ball left the punter's foot, he already knew he had time to work with. Before the ball was even kicked, he had scanned outside toward the opposing team's gunners, the players tasked with sprinting downfield to make the tackle, and he clocked immediately that they weren't getting a clean release off the line. They were getting held up. That tiny sliver of information told him everything he needed to know. The second the ball hit his hands, his mental checklist went down the field right alongside him in celebration, seeing genuine, unfiltered happiness on their faces. He said he kept thinking to himself that there was no way this was actually happening. And when asked what it meant to have his entire team rushing out to celebrate with him, drawing a penalty in the process because of just how excited everybody was, his answer said it all. It was something he had literally dreamed about for over a year, ever since the nightmare of last season began, and finally watching that dream come true in real time was, in his own words, definitely a special moment. He even opened up about the emotional toll all of this took on him, revealing that his mother was his biggest source of support throughout the entire ordeal. He called her his rock, someone who helped him push through when things felt impossibly difficult, and he made a point to publicly thank her for everything she did for him during that stretch. It's a small detail, but it adds an entirely new layer of humanity to a story that most fans only experienced as a highlight reel play with zero context behind it. And here's a detail that will make this story hit even harder. Just days before this touchdown happened, Cowing got banged up again at a routine practice. Anyone who had been following his injury history could feel the collective dread in that moment. Here we go again, the same pattern repeating itself. But instead of letting fear win, Cowing pushed through it, got back out on the field. and delivered what has been described as one of the best individual catches of the entire training camp, climbing the ladder over the middle to secure a difficult grab. When asked directly whether that specific moment carried extra weight given everything he had gone through, he didn't hesitate. He said he's got heart, that even banged up, he was going to go out there and give everything he had. Because the organization trusted him enough to draft him, and the very least he could do in return was give 100% effort every time he stepped on that field. And then, almost like a movie script, the very next opportunity he got, he turned it into that unforgettable touchdown. Now let's talk about what this all means for his roster spot, because there's a very practical, very real football conversation buried underneath this emotional story. Even if Cowing doesn't end up being a massive contributor as a traditional receiver, that blazing straight-line speed, the kind that shows up when he's timed in the low 4.3s, all but guarantees him a role on this roster, specifically as the team's dedicated punt returner. And there's recent history to back that theory up. Last season, a different receiver who didn't do much offensively still carved out a permanent roster spot purely because he was the team's punt returner. Special teams value like that simply doesn't get replaced easily. That said, and this is worth being clear-eyed about, there does appear to be a legitimate audition happening at outside receiver between Cowing and another young receiver on the roster. Both players were given extended run well into the second half of this particular game, and it did look at times like the coaching staff was deliberately testing Cowing on the outside, specifically on boundary routes. And here's the honest, unbiased truth about that experiment. At 5'9", Cowing is probably never going to be the ideal fit as a true outside receiver in the long run. Outside receivers typically need more height to win contested catches and extend their catch radius, especially on cross-field throws that travel the full width of an NFL field, which, for context, measures a surprisingly massive 53 and a third yards across. There were a couple of boundary throws intended for Cowing in this game that simply fell incomplete, not necessarily due to poor accuracy, but simply because of how difficult those throws are to place perfectly across that much real estate. The other receiver in that competition may ultimately be better suited for that specific outside role, but that doesn't diminish what Cowing brings to the table. His shorter frame, the very trait that might limit him on the outside, is exactly what makes him such a dangerous, shifty weapon in the return game. So while his long-term role as a full-time outside receiver remains a genuine question mark, his path onto this roster through special teams brilliance looks about as safe as it gets. Speaking of that other receiver in the mix, Jordan Watkins also found the end zone again in this same game, connecting with backup quarterback Adrian Martinez for another touchdown. And in a fun little moment captured after the game, there was some good-natured locker room joking between Martinez and fellow quarterback Mac Jones. Martinez, who ran the ball constantly during his college career, admitted with a laugh that he's not always thrilled with every single play he makes, but he can at least make them exciting to watch. Jones, in turn, jokingly owned up to being the polar opposite, admitting that he might not be the most electrifying player on the field, but he's the one making the safe, boring, fundamentally sound plays that quietly move the chains. It's a lighthearted moment, but it perfectly captures the contrast in styles at the backup quarterback spot, and honestly, it's true. Jones doesn't have elite speed, but the fundamentally sound, low-mistake football has real value of its own. And let's not forget the man at the very top of the quarterback depth chart. Starting quarterback Brock Purdy turned in a clean, efficient debut performance, completing 4 of 6 attempts on his single drive of work, logging right around 12 total snaps, which lines up perfectly with how the head coach typically likes to handle his starters' workload in early preseason action. Expect that number to climb in the next outing, potentially stretching into a full quarter of work as the preseason progresses. Now let's shift over to another emerging storyline that has fans genuinely buzzing: third-round rookie running back Kalin Black. After missing time earlier in camp with a torn adductor injury, Black has returned looking like he never left, And in this game, he finally got his first taste of live, real contact against an actual opposing team. When asked how it felt to finally get into legitimate tackling situations after so much no-contact practice work, Black's excitement was obvious. He talked about how good it felt to finally get into real contact, to put his shoulder down and grind out those tough extra yards, doing whatever it takes to help the team win. And this excitement makes complete sense once you understand his specific skill set. This is a back who reportedly averaged an outstanding 3.2 yards after contact per carry back in college, meaning his ability to break tackles and create additional yardage simply doesn't show up in a normal no-contact practice setting. He needed real bodies flying at him to actually showcase what makes him special, and in this game, he finally got that opportunity. There's also a great behind-the-scenes detail about how Black handled his time on the sideline while recovering from that earlier adductor injury. Rather than mentally checking out, he was spotted holding an actual play sheet during practices, tracking every single play, visualizing the calls, watching how his teammates were executing, and mentally noting areas where they could improve. When asked whether that discipline paid off in helping him return to the field without missing a beat, Black credited his coaching staff directly, saying they stayed on him constantly, making sure he remained locked into the playbook even while sidelined, and that extra preparation clearly made a difference the moment he stepped back onto the field. It's genuinely hard to understand the criticism that came Black's way when San Francisco selected him in the 3rd round of the draft. Here's a physically dominant running back, someone who reportedly runs in the low 4s, who excels in pass protection, who breaks tackles after contact at an elite clip, and who can also catch the ball out of the backfield. That's about as complete a running back skill set as you could hope to find at that point in the draft, and if this early sample size is any indication, he might end up being the best complementary running back this franchise has had behind their star lead back in roughly half a decade. Now let's touch on the receiver who has quietly become one of the most talked about names in the entire building this preseason, rookie wideout Deshaun Strebling. He did have one drop in this particular game, but it was overshadowed by yet another display of the exceptional hand strength that has become his calling card. And here's the detail that should really turn heads. The team's starting quarterback has openly admitted that Strebling's reputation for having remarkably strong hands actively factors into his decision-making process on crucial 3rd down situations. When asked directly about it, the quarterback explained that it's become common knowledge throughout the locker room just how strong this rookie's hands truly are, and that when the offense absolutely needs to stay on the field on 3rd down, that reputation genuinely influences which matchups and targets get prioritized. For a rookie to already be earning that level of trust and mental real estate in his starting quarterback's decision tree is an enormous sign of how quickly he's adapting to the professional level. There have been a few missed run-blocking assignments along the way that will likely get corrected in film review. But given his obvious work ethic, his physical tools, and his technical polish, those mistakes figure to become increasingly rare as the season progresses. Before we wrap up, let's run through a quick round of roster and injury notes that are worth keeping an eye on. The team is planning to test cornerback Renardo Green's hamstring with an update expected once the team gets back to their home training facility. If he does miss any time, veteran cornerback Jack Jones is set to step directly into that vacated role. Linebacker Nick Martin, who is responsible for forcing that massive fumble on special teams, is also dealing with a hamstring issue that will need to be evaluated. On the offensive line, Robert Jones, who had been considered a frontrunner to win the starting left guard job, got banged up and is likely to miss the final preseason game, while rookie Carver Willis started at left guard in this contest and played extensively at the position, potentially putting himself on the inside track now that he's gotten real snaps at the professional level. Elsewhere along the offensive line, Connor Colby manned the right guard spot. And keep an eye on wide receiver Wesley Grimes, a big-bodied target who has reportedly made a number of plays throughout training camp, but was notably quiet in this particular game. There's real chatter that the coaching staff might be strategically limiting his exposure specifically so they can attempt to sneak him through waivers and stash him on the practice squad without another team snatching him up. That storyline is worth monitoring closely as roster cut-down decisions approach. So there you have it. A touchdown that looked like just another preseason highlight on the surface, but underneath it carried the weight of 4 separate hamstring tears, a full year of physical and emotional battle, a mother who served as an emotional rock through the darkest stretches, and a locker room full of teammates who understood exactly how much that moment meant. Combine that with a rookie running back finally getting to unleash his tackle-breaking ability in live contact, a rookie receiver already living rent-free in his starting quarterback's third-down decision-making, and a genuinely fascinating left guard competition heating up on the offensive line, and you've got one of the richest, most emotionally layered storylines to come out of this entire preseason. If stories like this are exactly why you love following this team, you already know what to do. Smash that like button to help this channel reach even more Niners fans just like you. Drop a comment down below and let us know what part of Jacob Cowing's journey hit you the hardest, and who you think ultimately wins that left guard competition. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're bringing you fresh 49ers coverage all the way through the rest of the preseason and deep into the regular season grind. Until next time, faithful, keep the faith.